Hello, I'm Isabella, but everyone just calls me Isa. I guess you could say my story begins in a small town wrapped between the mountains and the sea, a place where the air smells like salt and pine, and where everyone knows what you had for breakfast by lunchtime. I've always had this feeling inside me, like something was waiting for me beyond the hills, beyond the sky, something just out of reach. Even as a little girl, I'd sit by the window and watch the clouds roll by, imagining myself riding on top of them to distant cities I'd never seen. My mom used to say I had a heart full of wind and dreams too big for a small-town girl. She wasn't wrong. I was never the type to settle. While other kids played tag in the dusty streets, I wandered through the woods, speaking to birds and pretending. The rustling leaves were secrets whispered just for me. I kept a notebook full of thoughts I didn't understand. Drawings of staircases to nowhere, maps to invisible places. I suppose I've always been like that. Half here, half somewhere else. My best friend Marcy used to laugh and say I was born with my head in the clouds and my feet on a different planet. Maybe I was. But something changed last summer. Something woke me up. It was the kind of change that whispers first and then roars. It came in the form of a letter that wasn't meant for me. Or maybe it was. I found it tucked inside one of the books at the old library, a place most people forgot existed. It was written in blue ink, the handwriting shaky, like someone had written it with trembling hands. The words were simple, but they hit something deep inside me. If you're reading this, it's not too late. That line played on repeat in my mind for days. Who was it meant for? What wasn't too late? I needed to know. That need was the spark, the thing that pulled me out of the fog I'd been living in. I didn't tell anyone, not even Marcy. I kept the letter under my pillow and read it every night, hoping the meaning would unravel itself like thread from an old sweater. But instead, I found myself changing. I started walking new paths, asking new questions, and soon, everything I knew would begin to shift. This, I suppose, is where the real story begins. The next day, I went back to the library. The building sat like a sleeping giant at the edge of town, its bricks worn and ivy creeping along the windows like green veins. It had been closed officially for years, but the old librarian, Miss Clara, still came by once a week to clean and sort the shelves, like she was waiting for someone who never arrived. I don't think she ever noticed me when I slipped in through the back, the key still hidden. Under the third rock by the broken fence, I knew every creak in the floorboards, every dusty aisle, every forgotten book. That day, I searched for clues. I checked the book where I'd found the letter. The secret garden. Nothing. I opened books at random, hoping to find another message, another sign. Hours passed. I was about to give up when I heard a noise, a soft thud. A book had fallen from the highest shelf in the corner. No breeze, no reason. It just fell. I walked over slowly, my heart thudding like a drum in my chest. The book's cover was cracked, leather worn, no title. Inside, on the third page, was another letter. This one said, "Look up." I did. Above me was an old chandelier, and carved into the wooden beam that held it were 4 numbers, 1942. I didn't know what it meant, but I wrote it down. I was shaking. I didn't understand what was happening, but I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Alive. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at my ceiling and repeated the number over and over. Something was calling me, something hidden in the past, and I was determined to find it. The number haunted me. I wrote it on my wrist in pen. I carved it lightly into the wood of my desk. I even tried saying it out loud like it was a spell. 1942. It felt like a code, like a key to something bigger. Marcy noticed I was distracted. At lunch, she waved a hand in front of my face and said, "Earth to Isa, come back from the moon." I smiled and shrugged, pretending I was just tired. But inside, I was buzzing with questions. That night, I asked my mom about the year 1942. She looked up from her knitting, surprised. "Why do you want to know about that?" I hesitated, then made up a story about a school project. She sighed and leaned back. It was a different time. My grandfather used to talk about that year a lot. Said something happened in this town, something strange, but he never explained it. That word again, strange. It followed me like a shadow. The next morning, I skipped class and walked to the historical archives in City Hall. Most kids didn't, even know the room existed. Inside, it smelled like time itself, dust, paper, and silence. I asked the woman at the desk if I could see anything related to the year 1942. She looked at me oddly but nodded. She brought out a box filled with faded newspapers, photos, and typed reports. I spent hours flipping through them until I found it. A headline, "Girl Disappears Without a Trace." Her name was Eleanor. She was 16. Same age as me. She lived 3 streets from where I did now. I stared at her picture, my heart pounding. Her eyes looked just like mine. And I knew, somehow, I had to find out what happened to her. That night, I dreamed of her, Eleanor. She stood in the woods behind the town wearing a white dress, her hair blowing in a wind I couldn't feel. She didn't speak. She just pointed. Behind her, trees parted like curtains, revealing a staircase made of stone descending into darkness. I woke up gasping. I drew the scene in my notebook as best I could, every detail still fresh in my mind. It felt real, too real. I decided to visit the woods the next day, the same place I used to play in when I was little. It was quiet, too quiet. Birds didn't sing, and the wind didn't blow. I walked for hours, tracing the dream, comparing trees, shadows, paths. And then I saw it. Moss-covered stone, barely visible behind a curtain of vines. My hands shook as I pulled the greenery away. There, beneath layers of time, was the top of a staircase, just like in the dream, just like Eleanor had shown me. I didn't know if I should go down, but I did. The steps groaned under my weight, and the air grew colder with each one. My flashlight flickered. At the bottom was a door, wooden, old, carved with strange symbols. I touched it, and it creaked, open on its own. Inside, I found a room full of notebooks, just like mine. The air in the room was heavy with dust and silence, as if it hadn't been disturbed in decades. I stepped inside slowly, the beam of my flashlight dancing across the shelves. Dozens of notebooks sat waiting. I picked one up and flipped through it. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. Not mine, but familiar. The dates started in 1941, pages filled with thoughts, dreams, drawings, maps, symbols, poems. It was Eleanor's voice speaking through the ink. One line stood, "Out. I'm not gone, just lost." I sat down on the cold stone floor, notebook in hand, and kept reading. I didn't notice the time passing. Hours slipped by like shadows. I read her story, how she felt different, like something was calling her, how she found the same letters, how she followed the clues. Her last entry sent a chill through me. Someone else will come. She will finish what I couldn't. My breath caught in my throat. That someone was me. It had to be. I closed the notebook and looked around. The room was more than a hiding place. It was a message, a guide. Eleanor had left it for me. I stood, a strange energy buzzing in my chest. This wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about me. About now. About what I had to do next. Back at home, I felt like I was carrying a secret too big for my body. The room, the notebooks, the words Eleanor wrote, all of it was swirling in my head like a storm. I didn't know who to talk to. Marcy wouldn't believe me. My mom would worry. And yet, I couldn't pretend nothing had happened. I kept Eleanor's last notebook with me, hidden inside my backpack. Every chance I got, I read it. She wrote about voices in the trees, about a melody that came only at night, about dreams that felt more like memories. One entry mentioned a mirror buried under the old oak tree in the schoolyard. It seemed crazy, but the next day, I waited until recess and snuck out to that tree. I dug near the roots with my hands, the soil damp and full of worms. After what felt like hours, I found something. A silver hand mirror, cracked. Its handle engraved with the same symbols I'd seen on the door in the woods. I stared at my reflection for a moment. I thought I saw Eleanor's face instead of mine. I dropped it. My pulse thundered. This wasn't imagination anymore. This was real. And I was in the middle of it. I started hearing music in the evenings, faint and distant, like a music box playing underwater. No one else seemed to notice. I asked Marcy one night while we walked home if she could hear anything strange. She gave me a weird look and said, "You okay, Issa?" I nodded. I didn't want to scare her. But the truth was, I wasn't okay. I couldn't sleep without dreaming of Eleanor, of staircases, of keys and doors and stars that blinked like Morse code. I began drawing them obsessively. My notebooks were filling up faster than ever. I didn't understand it, but my hands moved as if someone else was guiding them. One morning, I woke up with dirt on my feet. I didn't remember leaving the house. My mom thought I was just sleepwalking, but I wasn't so sure. I started setting up a camera at night. The footage showed me standing by my window, whispering to someone outside, someone who wasn't there. I watched the videos over and over, trying to hear what I was saying. It was always the same word, Eleanor. That night, I decided to return to the room underground. I had to know what she was trying to tell me. I went alone, flashlight and Eleanor's notebook in hand. The woods were darker than usual, even though the moon was full. The air felt thick, like the space between, thunder and lightning. I found the staircase easily, almost like it was waiting for me. The door opened with a sigh. Inside, I lit a candle I had brought with me. Something about the flickering flame made the shadows feel less sharp. I explored more carefully this time. Behind a shelf, I found a trap door. It was heavy, but I managed to lift it. Below was another room, smaller, round, with a mirror at the center. Not a hand mirror. This one was tall, ornate, like something out of a castle. I stepped toward it and felt the air grow colder. My reflection looked back at me, but it didn't move the way I did. It blinked before I did. It smiled when I didn't. I stumbled back. The reflection raised its hand and pointed, behind me. I turned quickly. but nothing was there. When I looked again, the mirror was just a mirror, or so I told myself. I climbed back up, heart racing, and ran all the way home. I didn't stop until I was under my blanket, shaking. I knew then I wasn't alone in this. The next few days blurred together. I was still going to school, still talking to people, but it all felt like a play I didn't believe in anymore. My real life was underground, in the woods, in dreams and whispers. I started reading Eleanor's earlier notebooks more carefully. There was a pattern to her entries, references to constellations and full moons and places around town where the symbols would appear only under moonlight. I started visiting them one by one, the abandoned well behind the church, the rusted water tower near the tracks, the cracked statue in the cemetery. At each place, I found carvings, some faded, some fresh. I took pictures, drew copies. I was building a map. But a map to what? I didn't know yet. What I did know was that Eleanor had been trying to open something. She called it the passage. And she believed it could only be opened by someone who was awake. I didn't fully understand what that meant, but I had a feeling I was becoming that someone, whether I wanted to or not. I started writing letters to Eleanor. I didn't. Nowhere to send them, so I buried them in the woods near the old oak. In the letters, I told her everything. What I'd seen, what I felt, what I feared. It helped somehow, like I was reaching across time. One evening, after burying my fourth letter, I heard a sound behind me. I turned, expecting wind or maybe an animal. But it was a girl. She looked just like the photo from the newspaper. Eleanor. She didn't speak. She simply smiled, reached into her pocket, and held out a key. A small, rusted skeleton key with a red ribbon tied around it. I blinked, and she was gone. I stood there, alone, the key in my hand. I didn't know whether to scream or cry or laugh. I ran home, locked my door, and stared at the key all night. What did it open? Why now? I kept it on a chain around my neck from then on like an amulet. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew Eleanor had chosen me, and that meant something. The more I searched, the less I felt afraid. The fear had turned into purpose. I walked the halls of school like I had a secret superpower. I was still Isa on the outside, quiet, dreamy, strange, but inside, I was a girl on a mission. One afternoon in Eleanor's notebook, I found a riddle I hadn't seen before. It read, "Where water meets stone and silence speaks, the door shall answer what the seeker seeks." I knew exactly where it meant. The river cave, just beyond the ridge. It was dangerous. People warned us about it for years, but I couldn't ignore the message. That Saturday, I packed water, food, a flashlight, and Eleanor's map. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I reached the cave before sunset. The mouth of it yawned like a beast, cold air pouring out in slow, damp breaths. I hesitated, then stepped inside. The ground was slippery, the ceiling low. I walked slowly, the beam of light leading me deeper into the dark. After what felt like forever, I reached a pool of still water. At the edge, carved into the stone, was the symbol from the mirror. I placed my hand on it, and the wall began to tremble. The wall opened, not like a door, but like a wound, slow and deliberate. Behind it was a chamber glowing with a pale blue light. Crystals lined the walls, humming softly. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it, a book, bound in deep blue leather, edged with silver. I stepped forward, my footsteps echoing like secrets. The moment I touched the book, I felt heat surge through my body, like I'd been struck by lightning and love at once. The pages turned on their own. Inside I saw stories of girls like me, dreamers, seekers. Each of them had found a passage. Each had faced a test. Eleanor's name was there too. Next to hers a phrase, incomplete. I kept reading. At the end of the book, there was a blank page, and beneath it, a line. The next story begins with you. I ran my fingers over the empty space, and words began to appear in my handwriting. I hadn't written them, but they were mine. Hello, I'm Isabella. The moment the book wrote my name, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just surprise, it was recognition. Like a memory I never knew I had was waking up. The cave felt alive, humming with unseen energy. I closed the book gently and placed it back on the pedestal. As soon as I did, the wall began to close again, hiding the chamber as if it had never been there. I retraced my steps out of the cave, but nothing looked the same. The path felt shorter. The trees outside seemed taller. The world had turned slightly on its axis, and I could feel it in my bones. Back home, I didn't speak to anyone. I barely ate. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying every detail, the words, the book, the key, Eleanor. That night, as I drifted off, I heard her voice, not in a dream, but in the room, a whisper that curled around my ear like wind. Finish the story, Isa. I sat up, heart pounding. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't imagining. She was here. Somehow. The following morning, I skipped school. I went back to the woods and returned to the underground room. Everything was as I left it, except the mirror. Now it shimmered like a surface of water in sunlight. I approached it slowly. My reflection blinked again, but this time it stepped forward. From inside the mirror. It was me, but not. Her eyes were braver, her stance stronger. She smiled at me. "You're almost ready," she said. I wanted to ask what she meant, but before I could, she raised her hand and touched the glass. So did I. The moment our fingers met, I saw flashes, images rushing past like lightning. Eleanor. The blue book. A clock with 13 hands. A staircase made of stars. A door at the bottom of a lake. I stumbled back, breathless. The mirror went still. I sat on the floor, overwhelmed. I wasn't afraid, but I was no longer sure where my reality ended and the other began. Somehow, they were merging, and I was the bridge. I started noticing things around town that felt off. Time moved strangely. I would leave the house in the morning, walk 5 blocks, and realize 2 hours had passed. I'd hear whispers in the wind, and sometimes they'd form words. Keep going. Don't stop. She's waiting. I tried to ignore them, but I couldn't. I felt like I was being pulled by invisible threads, leading me somewhere I didn't yet understand. Then one day I saw someone else following those same threads. A boy about my age, standing at the edge of the river near the cave. He held a notebook. When he turned, our eyes met, and something clicked. We knew each other. Not from school, not from town, from somewhere deeper. "You found it too," he said quietly. His name was Alex. He'd been following the symbols, the clues, the whispers, just like me. But his journey had started with a different girl. His sister, who had vanished 3 years ago. Her name was Clara. I felt a chill run down my spine. Clara had also been a seeker. Alex and I started comparing notes. We met in secret, shared maps, drawings, dreams. There were eerie similarities between Clara and Eleanor. Same age, same handwriting, even some of the same symbols in their journals. It was like they'd been following parallel paths. We realized there were more of us out there, people touched by this mystery, people who had seen through the cracks in the world. We started calling ourselves the in-between, neither fully here nor there. Each night I'd dream of doorways, and each morning I'd wake with a new mark on my skin, a faint symbol, like ink that faded after a few hours. One morning, Alex showed me the same mark on his wrist. "They're leading us somewhere," he whispered. And I believed him. One day I woke to find the word now drawn in the condensation of my window. That was all the sign I needed. We packed our bags. It was time to cross. The decision wasn't simple. I didn't want to disappear like Eleanor or Clara. I wanted to live. But I also knew that living without answers was its own kind of vanishing. I left a letter for my mom. I told her I loved her, that I wasn't running away but running toward something. I left another note for Marcy, who I hoped would one day understand. Alex met me at dawn. We went to the mirror underground where it all began. We stood side by side. The mirror glowed, and this time when we touched it, the glass melted like mist. We stepped through. The world on the other side was light and shadow, silence and song. Everything shimmered with possibility. We weren't in our town anymore. We weren't anywhere I could name. But we were exactly where we needed to be. The sky was violet. The trees hummed. Paths curved in impossible ways. And there, waiting by a bridge made of light, was Eleanor. She was older now, or maybe just clearer. "You came," she said. She led us through the new world with confidence. She explained that this place was called the Between, a realm for dreamers who dared to ask questions. Time worked differently here. Thoughts shaped reality. "You're not here to stay," she said. "You're here to remember who you are." I didn't fully understand, but I trusted her. We spent days, maybe weeks, exploring, learning. Each place we visited taught us something. One meadow let you hear your future in the wind. A tower showed you your deepest fear. A forest echoed with every choice you never made. At first, it was overwhelming. But slowly it became freeing. I felt like I was shedding layers of a life I hadn't chosen. I was becoming. One night, under a sky with 2 moons, Eleanor gave me the blue book again. "It's yours now," she said. "You must write the ending." I opened to the last page. It was blank again, waiting, watching. I took the pen in my hand and began to write. As I wrote, the world responded. My words shaped mountains, stirred rivers, colored the sky. I realized that writing wasn't just about stories. It was about building truth. I wrote about courage, and a tree grew from the ground beside me. I wrote about love, and a song filled the air. I wrote about fear, and a shadow slithered through the grass. Eleanor touched my shoulder. "What you write, you must face." I kept going. I wrote about Isa, the girl who once stood in her room, unsure, alone. I wrote about her awakening, her journey, her transformation. I wrote about the mirror, the book, the key. I wrote about Clara, about the other seekers, about the door still closed. And finally, I wrote a new line. She walked forward, not knowing what came next, but knowing she would not stop. The book glowed, pages flipped, a wind rose. The sky cracked with light, and a new doorway appeared, this one made of starlight and memory. I looked at Alex. He nodded. We stepped through,